Cold War video part 6. This is the last of the Cold War section. The remaining stuff will be about the European Union and will technically be a separate part and covered after the Cold War test. So, for a moment, just as a brief, to touch upon something here, every once in a while you might get a question about Willy Brandt and something called Ostpolitik. Ostpolitik. Again, I apologize to my German folks for totally ruining some of their language. Essentially, Ostpolitik is going to be a part of Brandt's particular foreign policy, part of form of détente, his de-escalation of Cold War tension. He is the Chancellor of West Germany in 1969, and there's this mood of change that is ushered in with his election, and essentially he's going to try to ease the decades of tension between Moscow and Washington. He's going to reach out to the Eastern Bloc, to Eastern Germany, and try to keep the lines of communication open, and he gets a little bit of time on the test because, again, it was they were so worried and they were so fearful of war that him actually reaching out and making these overtures to be friendly towards the East was pretty controversial. So he ends up winning a Nobel Peace Prize in 1971. Also, it's one of those blurbs in the Princeton Review book. So hey, anytime I see that, that's the guy who writes the test. So we'll take a moment to talk about it. So in Poland in 1980, there's going to be a famous guy named Lech Walesa. Again, pardon my Poles if I'm completely butchering the poor man's name. And he is going to be a part of a group called Solidarity, the Solidarity Movement. That's a capital S Solidarity. They are an official group, an official thing. And he is going to try to get to peacefully reject, to try and get the Communist Party out of office. And of course, this is going to cause Gorbachev to have to come in and actually step in. But at this point in time, Russia, the Soviet Union, has got bigger problems to worry with as far as its economy than to try and squash another regime. And so by 1989, the voters are actually going to peacefully reject communism. They're going to elect Walesa as president in 1990, and by 1999 their economy has improved because of market-based reforms. So Poland is going to be one of those first countries to really stand up against the USSR, try to change things, move things in a different direction, and it's pretty significant that Gorbachev at that point isn't going to do anything to stop it, that he is going to allow this to happen. Getting back to our presidents and our flow of where we're at with the presidents, we're going to go back in time here for just a moment with Jimmy Carter, peanut farmer from Georgia. He is going to be famous for something called the Camp David Accords, peace agreements between the Egyptians and the Israelis. Tries to get them to talk and actually stops a little bit of their tensions for just a little while. But unfortunately, he is also the president during the Iran hostage crisis, which is going to fail when the embassy is taken. And again, a word on that, if you want to see a really great movie, and of course you have your parents' permission because it is rated R and you are not 17 or 18, then watch Argo. With Ben Affleck, just recently came out, and it talks about how the American embassy is taken over and the folks are attempting to get back to the United States in Iran. The Iran hostage crisis is a bit of a complex time period in history, and I've got another one of those really quick, really easy worksheets that kind of help you understand what's going on. It's going to start back with a disagreement with Britain and Iran. It's going to involve someone called a Shah. It involves someone called an Ayatollah. But essentially what's going to happen is Islamist students who were part of the anti-government movement against the Shah are going to storm and capture the American embassy in Tehran on November 4th, 1979. They're going to take 52 Americans hostage. They will actually keep them for 444 days before it's all said and done with. But essentially, the U.S. supports the Shah, which is the Prince High King ruler of Iran, and the Shah is not a very popular person. Again, they believe he's just a puppet for the United States and outside influences. And when the Shah is gone from the country, and you'll read this in the handout and the worksheet, when the Shah is gone, the Muslim faction of and protest, the students come in and take over the embassy. They are actually going to not want to work with the president. They're not going to want to work with Carter. They are following orders, and they are backed by the Ayatollah, the religious and spiritual head of the country, and eventually when the hostages are released, it is 1 or 2 days after Jimmy Carter is no longer president, because they flat out say they will not work with Carter, and that the hostages will not be returned until Jimmy Carter is no longer president. So a little bit of a there you have it kind of thing with Carter's presidency. So again, one of those things that kind of mars one of the black spots on yet another president's presidency in the in this time period. So again, we've got a lot of different cartoons and things out there for this time period. And again, make sure that you have answered the questions on the Iran hostage crisis before you take the test. So we moved on to Ronald Reagan, who, yes, coincidentally, if you knew this already, nice job on the trivia part. If you knew he was an actor, you can actually see him in quite a few of those old movies, especially westerns. He effectively ends the Cold War by basically outspending them. He spent money and outspent them out of contention, and that's basically what they were talking about in the detente video when we get towards the end. With the Strategic Defense Initiative, or Star Wars, again, he's kind of breaking treaties, but that is what he is known for, breaking the previous treaties about non-proliferation and not setting up new defense mechanisms. He, again, is trying to basically weaponize space, but, again, nothing comes of that. It's not quite possible at the time. He continues space programs. He is the man who utters those famous words, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall," where, again, he wants to take the Berlin Wall down and unite East and West Germany once again. And you can, again, listen to his speech video if you pull the actual PowerPoint up. And there's also a little bit of a fun brain break in there for you, again, if you pull up the absent PowerPoint. But essentially, the USSR is beginning to dissolve. Its economy just is not keeping up. They're trying to spend as much as they possibly can on weapons and on defense. But unfortunately, they probably should have been helping to develop the internal structures, spending all this money on missiles and defense when basically they can't, they can't even buy bread. Here is Mr. Ronald Reagan, President Ronald Reagan, and a picture of what space would have looked like underneath Star Wars. Oh, nope, there's the Star Wars picture. And here he is, of course, telling Mr. Gorbachev, please tear down this wall, right there on the wall itself. So, with the decline of communism in Germany, we have the actual reunification. The wall is torn down, and of course, mass immigration from the east to the western side, because the eastern side is just so economically wrecked, where the western side has been prosperous. Germany has actually helped to make the eastern side as economically viable as the western side today, and has actually moved on from that. So again, helping to try and rebuild World War I, and here's just a brief history in 1 century of what Germany has had to go through. Hungary and Czechoslovakia, we're getting into some more countries again that as the Berlin Wall comes down and as Gorbachev is seen as not interfering in Poland, slowly but surely more countries are going to start to fall away from communism. As the détente video said, a reverse domino effect. Instead of one country becoming communist, so all of them will fall to communism, it's basically the other way around. As one country starts to slowly liberate, the USSR will eventually break apart, and the little itty-bitty pieces of the USSR will become their own countries, and the USSR will become just Russia once again. So here's a little bit of a comparison for you. Before Gorbachev, you've got this free election promise, but of course that is brutally suppressed by Khrushchev. He puts the Hungarians down. The Alexander Dubček instituting those liberal reforms, trying to, again, just change things up a little, and the result is, of course, the Prague Spring, where there's the occupation of Czechoslovakia and Dubček is exiled. And that is when we have the Brezhnev Doctrine issued. Remember I said that Khrushchev will eventually be pushed out after the Cuban Missile Crisis because he's too liberal. He's not making his other Stalin members of the Soviet Union happy. Well, Brezhnev is going to be the guy who's going to come in next. So his job obviously is going to be more of a hardliner, less of a compromiser than Khrushchev. So he's going to have his own doctrine. We'll take a look at that on the next slide. Under Gorbachev, however, Poland is going, and following Poland's lead, Hungary is going to have free elections by 1989. And in Czechoslovakia, with the Velvet Revolution, again, Gorbachev's going to order reform. He's going to go along with the country. Dubček's going to return, and he's going to come back as their head of parliament. So distinctly different reactions. As a matter of fact, it would make a great FRQ to talk about the reaction of the Soviet Union in pre-1960s and I guess mid-60s and 70s through 40s reactions to revolt versus the 80s, late 80s reactions to revolts. Again, Khrushchev, Brezhnev versus Gorbachev. So again, the Brezhnev Doctrine all starts back there in Czechoslovakia as Dubček is initiating those new reforms. He wants to create socialism with a human face. So getting rid of the more Stalinist USSR brand of communism and more of their own brand of socialism. He's going to be expelled from the party. And again, Prague Spring is an unsuccessful attempt to remove those hardliner communist ideas. But of course, he's later going to become the chairman of the Federal Assembly as things change later in 1989. Brezhnev, on the other hand, is alarmed by Dubček's reforms. Again, he can't be seen as being too soft. That's what got Khrushchev out, and that's why they voted him in power. So he calls on the other Warsaw Pact countries to invade, and that, of course, is the Prague Spring. So the Brezhnev Doctrine essentially is the right to intervene in the affairs of other communist countries if it's running away from or running against the ideas and the policies of the communists and the Warsaw Pact countries. So this is the Brezhnev Doctrine. Please take note. The collapse of the Soviet Union. By 1985, again, Mikhail Gorbachev is in power, and he realizes that there has to be something that is done. He realizes his country is in some economic peril, and he institutes two policies, glasnost and perestroika. And if you look in your crash course, there's actually three. The last one looks like democratic, and that's about as close as I can get. I'm then totally butchering it on page 218 of the REA Crash Course book. But essentially, it's leading to the democratization of the ones that we really focus on and Euro focuses on is the idea of glasnost, the openness to new ideas and the openness to new economies and new ideas of trade, and the restructuring. Again, he realizes he cannot keep going the way he has been. Because it's not working. So within 6 years, these Soviet satellite nations, again, satellites, the ones that are out there in their economic sphere of influence, they're going to slowly start moving ahead economically, and the Soviet Union is going to disintegrate because of this. Those countries are slowly going to start to move away. He introduces capitalist ideas. You have McDonald's in Moscow now, for heaven's sake. So with these policies, he thought of openness and restructuring that he thought would help save the communist system actually are counterintuitive to the communist system. They end up allowing other countries to become more economically sound, and they decide that they want to move away from communism. So slowly but surely, all of the countries are going to leave. This is going to cause some this is going to basically be the downfall of Gorbachev, and the crash course does a good job of talking about how it's the downfall of Gorbachev. Essentially, he knows something's wrong, he tries to change it, but the hardliners, the ones, again, that didn't want to necessarily have all of this change, are going to try and overthrow him in a military coup. And the guy who's going to lead the coup is Boris Yeltsin. And this is all covered in your crash course book on page 220. Gorbachev is going to announce his resignation as the president of a country that he said that by then had ceased to exist. Okay, he tried to reform the unreformable. So Yeltsin is going to take over, and those hardliners are going to get their way. The exceptions to this, of course, with the other countries that slowly start to get their own independence and their own economic systems and governments back up and running, are going to be Yugoslavia and Chechnya. Yugoslavia is going to have its own problems with internal strife and different cultures inside Yugoslavia, and hopefully you know that it doesn't stay Yugoslavia for long. So here are your chapter 6, or your checkup questions for number 6. Please note, if you can't see down there at the bottom and you don't have the absent file also pulled up on your computer, that the last question is define glasnost and perestroika. Define glasnost and perestroika.